Jill!
Chris!
Barry.
Resident Evil starts with STAR's Alpha team being sent into the Forbidden Forest to find Bravo team, who mysteriously disappeared in the Arklay Mountains. They find their helicopter crashed with the majority of their crew missing until out of nowhere some rabid decaying dogs decide that they need new chew toys.
Oh no!
The rest of the group, consisting of Jill, Chris, Barry, and Wesker, flee from the mangy mutts, arriving at an eccentric mansion. And here's where the story gets muddled. You see, when you start the game, you're given the choice to either play as Chris or Jill, each with their own gameplay and story differences. Furthermore, you'd assume that only one of these characters could be the canon story, since they mostly play through the same beats. Unfortunately, if you assumed this, you would be wrong. The overall structure is pretty simple, but the exact specifics of the story is left incredibly vague and nebulous. Also, the fact that certain characters are just completely exclusive to specific stories means that who does what and when is pretty ambiguous. Effectively, it means that the canon version of the game is a fusion of both campaigns, despite that not actually making any sense. In order to make this as simple and straightforward as possible for you, the viewer at home, I'll be making it even more confusing by switching between Chris and Jill's story at the flick of a switch.
This is Jill!
Jill, Barry, and Wesker make it to the mansion, but upon arriving they find that Chris apparently got turned into dog food. Naturally, Jill attempts to return outside to search for their comrade, to which Wesker replies with,
Jill, no.
Barry then hears various stock sounds coming from the other room, leading to Joey and Tristan investigating the strange noise.
This is Chris!
Chris, Jill, and Wesker make it to the mansion, leaving Barry outside in the mystery zone with the angry Poochies. Chris then enters the dining room, discovering a pool of spicy boy juice by the fireplace. It really lets spicy boy juice in the script. He then checks out the adjacent corridor, only to find out that one of the locals got a little too into the green herb culture and got funky with the munchies.
Barry?
Jill runs back into the dining room, screaming at Barry to shoot that stoner, to which he happily obliges. They then return to the foyer, finding that Vanilla Ice has disappeared as well, causing Beavis and Butthead to split up once more in order to find Chris and Wesker.
Wesker!
Chris returns to the foyer, finding that Jill and Wesker have vanished, with the only trace being Jill's handgun and Wesker's Magnum condoms. While exploring the mansion, various wacky situations occur, such as Jill disturbing a zombie who's just trying to purify his rancid odor, and Chris getting crushed to death. They also find scattered members of Bravo team with varying amounts of blood still left in their body. Kevin didn't even make it out of the helicopter, so it's good that he had 40 years of military training. Kenneth was the dude getting munched on by the first zombie, and Forrest gets pecked to death by crows, subsequently reanimates and is put down with the rest of the animals. We've yet to meet the 3 remaining members, but they share a slightly different story.
Richard!
Jill finds Richard, another Bravo team member, whimpering on the second floor since he just had his left arm obliterated by a moderately large snake. He moans and whines about how he's going to die and how this mansion is some Scooby-Doo bullshit, leading to Jill collecting some serum to shut him up and coincidentally cure the snake's poison.
Rebecca!
Chris encounters Richard, but this time he's being cared for by an exclusive character to his story, one Rebecca Chambers, the medic of Bravo team who's also the protagonist of another game. Don't worry, Miss Chambers. You'll get to your game one day.
Okay.
In order to collect all the needed MacGuffins to progress the plot, Jill must play the correct song in the bar on the provided piano, which she does seamlessly.
Okay!
Chris attempts to play the song on the piano until his big sister comes in, rips the controller out of his hands and plays it for him, thus allowing him to progress. At this point, Earl or Randy would need to go and collect the final key item in order to progress, which is guarded by Yawn, the giant snake who left his mark on Richard's flesh in a crime of passion.
It's a monster!
Jill arrives at the attic, fully equipped to fight the snake with a myriad of weapons, when suddenly Richard bursts in, screaming about how Scaly shouldn't have rights. Understandably offended by this, Yawn vores him on the spot.
Oh no!
Before swoosing out the window, scratching another member of the Bravo team, but giving Jill a shiny new shotgun.
What is that?
Chris arrives at the attic with a second-hand gun and a butter knife, where he somehow manages to take down Black Mamba before he escapes once again.
Hold on!
Jill places all 4 death masks in their specially designed slots because billionaires have far too much money and imagination, causing a coffin to drop to the ground. Inside is the first Crimson Head, a special type of zombie that is designed to be tougher and make the player shit their pants when they rise from the ground after you kill a regular zombie. Jill starts blasting and collects an Umbrella Fun Bug, granting her access to the garden area.
So much for him!
Chris gets a call from Brad, the helicopter pilot who decided to abandon the rest of the team at the beginning of the game, because being alive is pretty badass. The call is meaningless, leading Chris further into the courtyard where he encounters a fist pounding the back of his head.
What's going on?
Jill wakes up after having been sucker punched by Leatherface and Quasimodo's love child before escaping to the guest house. After a little exploring, Jill notices Barry talking to someone in the other room with some mutterings about how Stars doesn't have to be demolished. She then questions Barry on who he was talking to which Barry replies with,
Jill, no. Please!
Chris explores the remainder of the guest house, finding a ladder that leads to a secret evil underwater laboratory. Only in Resident Evil, folks. He finds Richard, who despite being comatose for most of the game at this point, decides that his lifelong ambition is to get bored by Queen Neptune, a giant shark because Umbrella. Chris drains the water, kills countless innocent sea denizens, and grabs a single key, which is actually the only important thing in this entire area. Seriously, all of this elaborate lab and shark bullshit for a single fucking key.
Sure.
Jill returns from the Aqua Lab using the key she collected to open a new door into a Professor Layton puzzle. She mixes some chemicals until she creates V-Jolt, a concoction that allows you to skip the worst boss in the game, Plant 42. After dousing its roots in battery acid, she gets grabbed by Los Plantas before Barry comes in and Kurt Russells it to death.
We got to the root of the problem.
Chris is apparently too stupid to understand how to count to 20, meaning that he just has to shooterize the vile Viola to death. After collecting the final mansion key, he runs into Wesker again, who tells him that this residence is somewhat evil.
Wesker!
Jill runs into Wesker again, who tells her that Barry is acting kind of suspicious and that he's probably the imposter.
Sussy baka.
She then returns to the mansion, where she also comes up against the Hunters, frog/lizard/whatever boys who are a little less than friendly.
Really?
Chris hears a Rebecca-based squeal coming from the second floor of the mansion and arrives just in time to stop Rebecca from being killed by DJ Froggy Fresh. After making them even with the whole piano incident, Chris decides that he's had enough of reptiles in general and goes and finishes off Yawn in the library.
Enrico!
Jill collects a battery after killing Yawn, allowing her to enter a cave system because this mansion is basically Disneyland in size, color, and rodents. She finds the captain of Bravo team, Enrico, who tells her that there's a traitor Among Us before he gets shot because I already made an Among Us joke. She ventures further into the caves, fighting Black Tiger, who dies really easily, and reunites with Barry, who's still looking for a back to place his knife in. One level down, Jill re-encounters the abomination from the guest house, causing Barry to vanish in a puff of heroic smoke, leaving Jill to fend against the creature herself. Oh, I should probably talk about who this character is and why she matters. Okay, so I won't go into the nitty-gritty, but I feel as though I should mention who the Trevor family are because it's a pretty integral part of the plot. Basically, George Trevor was hired by Oswald Spencer, an elusive billionaire, to build an unbelievably complex mansion for shits and giggles. And after doing so, he and his family were invited to stay there, where they were pretty much kidnapped and experimented on immediately. A lot of nasty shit happens to them, with the wife and daughter being injected with the T-virus, causing the wife to die and the daughter to mutate horrifically. George would then eventually die after running from Spencer's goons for multiple days, leaving his corpse buried inside the mansion's own walls. Now, since Lisa would be reasonably miffed with her parents being used and abused, she started collecting and wearing faces to hide her hideous form and wanders the grounds searching for her family. She's also pretty much incapable of dying, which would explain why bullets are about as effective as harsh language. So yeah, all in all, Spencer isn't a very nice person. And who exactly is he, you ask?
I don't know.
We'll leave that for later.
What are you doing in this place?
Chris has a similar experience to Jill, coming face to face with his arch-nemesis, watching Enrico become die, and fleeing from Lisa Trevor. He eventually enters an ominous-looking tomb where our good pal Wesker is already doing battle with Miss Trevor.
Barry!
Jill finds Barry inspecting the tomb where she promptly steals his 24-inch steel python and questions why he left her to die. Barry gulps, gasps, and filibusters until Lisa Trevor shows up, causing him to guilt-trip Jill into giving him his gun back before they fight her together. Jill opens up the tomb, revealing Lisa's mother buried inside, causing Lisa to collect her skull from the tomb before diving into the pits below. Fully confident that the man who blatantly just tried to kill her is innocent, Jill carries on to the actual final area. Because it's not a Resident Evil game if we don't end it on a lab.
Science! Fuck yeah!
Wesker?
Chris separates from Mr. Trustworthy and begins his endeavor into the Umbrella Labs. He finds out more about Umbrella and how they're using the T-virus to create a bunch of mutated animals, because bioweapon is a fun word to say. There's also something called the Tyrant, which we'll get to shortly.
You are the man behind all of this.
Jill ventures even further into the lab with Barry, where they find Wesker, who's actually been the traitor this whole time. Turns out Umbrella is holding Barry's family hostage, meaning that he has to follow Wesker's orders if he ever wants to play Risk or Monopoly again. Wesker then reveals the Grand Master of all monsters, the Tyrant. Oh my god, it's so fucking stupid. I don't even really need to talk about it, but I'm gonna because the Tyrant is unfathomably stupid. It's supposedly the ultimate life form, but if it's so ultimate, why the fuck would you put its heart on the outside? And give it only one claw, meaning it has one completely useless arm? And completely remove its dong, giving it a Ken-like physique? And put the heart on the fucking outside. I've seen fucking Zelda bosses with less obvious weak points. What the fuck were you thinking, Umbrella?
Hi, everybody!
Anyway, Jill calls Wesker pathetic, causing him to slap her with the fury of 1,000 suns, triggering Barry to come back and annihilate his shoulder. However, Wesker manages to wake up the Tyrant before seemingly dying, meaning that Jill has to put down the bioweapon equivalent of a potato battery for good.
Jill!
Chris defeats the Tyrant after it impaled its
Non-biological father!
and decides to escape this hellish laboratory with Rebecca. On the way out, he finds Jill trapped in a cell, causing him to get a little too excited and fucking explode.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Jill frees Chris from the cell and proceeds to the helipad with half of Alpha Team still intact, as well as Brad hovering overhead. Unfortunately, Dr. Clutastrophe has something to say about that mild success, swiping Chris away and giving Jill one final fight. Captain Coward throws a rocket launcher at Jill, giving her the weapon she needs to kill history's worst design once and for all. The remainder of Stars escapes in the helicopter, with the game ending with the now exhausted team literally flying into the sunset. Also, Castle Oblivion fucking explodes.
Oh no,